Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, is remembered not only for her crown and her kingdom, but for the two legendary love affairs that shaped the destiny of the ancient world. First, her bond with Julius Caesar, and later, her deep passion for Mark Antony. These romances were filled with power, politics, and dreams of empires, yet they also carried with them betrayal, scandal, and tragedy. Tonight, I will take you through the gentle telling of her story, slowly, calmly, and quietly, so that as you listen, your mind can rest and your eyes can grow heavy. But before we drift together into the past, I invite you kindly to press the like button if you enjoy these soft and simple histories. Leave a comment if you wish. Share this with someone else who needs a quiet night, and don't forget to subscribe so that more peaceful stories find their way to you. Do all of that now, before your eyelids grow heavy and sleep carries you away. Now, take a deep breath, settle into comfort, and let us begin. Cleopatra VII was not an ordinary queen, and her story with Julius Caesar was not an ordinary love affair. It was a meeting of two of the most remarkable figures of the ancient world, each driven by ambition, intelligence, and a hunger for power. But to understand how their paths crossed, we must begin with Cleopatra's desperate situation when she was still in her early 20s. She was born in 69 BC into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that had ruled Egypt since the days of Alexander the Great. By the time she became queen at the age of 18, she was no stranger to the brutal politics of her family. Siblings were rivals, marriages were arranged within the dynasty, and betrayal was common. Her father, Ptolemy XII, had left the throne to both Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, as was the custom, but the boy's advisors quickly seized control. They treated Cleopatra as an enemy rather than a co-ruler, and within a few years she was forced into exile. It seemed her reign had ended before it truly began. Driven out of Alexandria, Cleopatra found herself wandering in the harsh desert with a handful of loyal followers, while her younger brother sat on the throne in the capital. Yet Cleopatra was not the kind of woman to surrender. She had been educated in philosophy, politics, and languages. Unlike many members of her dynasty, she spoke the Egyptian language fluently and understood how to charm her subjects. She knew her strengths lay not only in her beauty, which ancient writers exaggerated endlessly, but in her intelligence and charisma. She was determined to win back what was rightfully hers. And then fortune shifted in her favor. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar, the most powerful Roman general of his age, sailed into Egypt. He was 52 years old, at the height of his influence, fresh from victory in Rome's civil wars. But his rival, Pompey the Great, had fled to Alexandria seeking refuge. Cleopatra's brother, or rather his advisors, murdered Pompey, hoping to win Caesar's favor. Instead, they disgusted him. Caesar was not impressed by the treachery, and worse, he soon found himself in the middle of Egypt's royal family feud. For Cleopatra, this was her chance. She knew that if she could secure Caesar's support, she could regain her throne. The problem was that she could not simply walk into Alexandria. Her brother's forces controlled the city and watched every movement. To reach Caesar, she needed cunning and daring. This is where legend enters the story. Ancient writers, including Plutarch, tell us that Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's palace wrapped in a carpet, or some say a linen sack. The bundle was carried past guards by one of her loyal servants and delivered directly to Caesar's private chambers. When the carpet was unrolled, Cleopatra stepped out, radiant, bold, and unafraid. Imagine the scene. The young queen, only 21, standing before the most powerful man in Rome. Dressed in her finest robes, her eyes gleaming with determination. Caesar, weary from war and politics, suddenly confronted with this daring woman who risked everything just to stand before him. It was not only her appearance that impressed him, but her audacity. Few women, indeed few rulers, would have dared such a gamble. In that moment, Cleopatra had already won a victory. Their connection was immediate.
Caesar was a man who admired intelligence and courage, and Cleopatra possessed both in abundance. She was witty, charming, and highly educated, capable of speaking with him about politics, philosophy, and strategy. She did not behave like a supplicant, but like a partner. And in the days that followed, their relationship grew into both a personal and political alliance. Caesar agreed to support her claim to the throne. This was not merely out of affection, but also practical. Egypt was enormously wealthy, the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, and Caesar needed Egypt's grain and riches to strengthen his position in Rome. Backing Cleopatra ensured that Egypt would remain a loyal ally, not a hostile rival. Their affair, then, was as much about strategy as it was about passion. War soon followed. Caesar fought against Cleopatra's brother Ptolemy XIII and his supporters in the streets of Alexandria. The city became a battlefield. Cleopatra remained by Caesar's side throughout the campaign. In the end, Caesar's forces prevailed. Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile while attempting to flee, and Cleopatra was restored as queen. She was officially married to another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as tradition demanded, but everyone knew that the true ruler of Egypt was Cleopatra herself. For Cleopatra, the rewards of her affair with Caesar were immense. She had regained her throne, secured her kingdom's independence, and gained the protection of the most powerful man in the world. But there was more. In 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy XV, Philopator Philometor Caesar, but the world would know him simply Caesarion, Little Caesar. This child was the ultimate symbol of Cleopatra's triumph. Through him, her dynasty was now tied to Rome's greatest general. Caesar never publicly acknowledged Caesarion as his heir, but Cleopatra believed deeply in his legitimacy. To her, he was proof that Egypt and Rome were bound by more than politics. They were bound by blood. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar did not end with her victory in Egypt. She traveled with him along the Nile, showing him the wonders of her land. Ancient accounts suggest they sailed together for weeks, perhaps even months, on a grand barge, enjoying a kind of royal honeymoon. Cleopatra displayed Egypt's wealth, its temples, and its traditions, ensuring that Caesar saw her not just a lover, but a powerful queen with a rich and ancient culture behind her. In time, she traveled to Rome with her young son. Caesar welcomed her there, installing her in a villa across the Tiber. For Cleopatra, this was the height of her influence. Few foreign rulers were ever treated with such honor in the heart of Rome. Statues of her likeness were even placed in temples, something unheard of for a queen of foreign blood. But this triumph came at a cost. To many Romans, Cleopatra was not a respected ally, but a dangerous intruder. They saw her as a sorceress who had bewitched their great general. The senators despised her influence and whispered that Caesar intended to make himself king, with Cleopatra as his queen. Rome had long hated the idea of monarchy, and Cleopatra's presence seemed to confirm their worst fears. The scandal grew worse when Cleopatra stayed in Rome openly as his companion. His legal wife, Calpurnia, still lived there, yet Cleopatra walked through the city as if she were Caesar's true partner. Roman society fumed, but Caesar was unmoved. He continued to honor her, to host her as his banquets, and to keep her close. Cleopatra enjoyed these years in Rome, basking in her power and prestige, but the storm clouds were gathering. Caesar had made too many enemies. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, he was struck down by a group of senators who feared he aimed to become a king. Cleopatra, still in Rome, suddenly found her world collapsing. With Caesar dead, her greatest protector was gone. The advantages of their affair vanished in an instant. Worse still, her very connection to him made her a target. She hurried back to Egypt with her son, aware that the political situation in Rome was too dangerous for her to remain. The cons of her affair were now painfully clear. She had tied her throne and her dynasty to one man, and when he fell, she was left exposed. Caesarion, though she loved him dearly, was not recognized in Rome as Caesar's heir. Instead, Caesar's nephew Octavian claimed that position, and Caesarion's very existence became a threat to him. The child who symbolized Cleopatra's greatest hope also carried the seeds of future peril. Yet, for all the risks and consequences, Cleopatra's affair with Julius Caesar had given her everything she had dreamed of when she first wrapped herself in that carpet and dared to meet him. It had given her back her throne, secured Egypt's independence, and, for a time, placed her among the most powerful figures of the ancient world. It had made her a partner, however briefly, to the man who ruled Rome. Theirs was not a love story in the simple sense. It was a union of ambition and necessity, passion and politics. Cleopatra was no helpless seductress, as Roman propaganda would later claim, but a queen who used every tool at her disposal to survive and thrive in a world dominated by men. Caesar, for his part, found in her not only a lover, but a ruler who could match his intellect and charisma. When she returned to Alexandria after his death, Cleopatra knew the game was not over. She had lost her greatest ally, but her ambition remained unshaken. Rome would not leave Egypt alone, and she would once again need to seek protection from its generals. Years later, she would find that protector in Mark Antony, leading to another chapter of passion, power, and tragedy. But before Antony, there was Caesar. Before the defeat at Actium, before her fateful death, Cleopatra's story began with that bold night when she stepped out of a rolled carpet and captured the heart of the Roman world. That affair was her first great gamble, a gamble that lifted her to greatness and set the course of history for both Egypt and Rome.
Cleopatra's first affair with Julius Caesar had secured her throne, given her a son, and placed her for a brief moment at the center of Roman politics. But when Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March in 44 BC, everything changed. She returned to Egypt with her little boy, Caesarion, and watched from a distance as Rome plunged into another civil war. For a few years, she ruled carefully, avoiding entanglement while Caesar's assassins battled his allies. But Cleopatra knew Egypt's fate was tied to Rome's destiny. Sooner or later, she would be forced to choose a side. By 41 BC, that moment arrived. The Roman world was divided between Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and longtime friend. Together with a third man, Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, ruling the Republic as a three-headed dictatorship. But tensions soon grew between Octavian and Antony. Antony took control of the eastern provinces, while Octavian dominated Rome itself. It was in this world of shifting alliances and bitter rivalries that Cleopatra would meet the second great love of her life. Mark Antony was a man of immense charisma and legendary appetites. He was a skilled commander, loyal to his soldiers, and known for his rough humor and love of feasting. He was also impulsive, extravagant, and easily swayed by desire. At the time of their meeting, he was in his early 40s, a seasoned warrior who had fought alongside Caesar for years. Cleopatra, now 28 years old, was more experienced, more calculating, and more determined than ever to secure Egypt's independence. Their meeting took place in the city of Tarsus in Cilicia. Antony summoned Cleopatra to answer accusations that she had supported Caesar's assassins. The queen understood that this was not merely a summons, but an opportunity. If she could win Antony's favor, as she once won Caesar's, Egypt would again be protected. And so she prepared one of the most famous entrances in history. She sailed up the Cydnus River on a magnificent barge with golden sails and silver oars. The decks were strewn with purple, the color of royalty, and Cleopatra herself reclined beneath a canopy dressed as the goddess Isis. Perfumes filled the air, and attendants fanned her with ostrich feathers. Musicians played, while servants scattered flowers on the water. To the people of Tarsus, it seemed as if a goddess had descended from the heavens. Antony was stunned. This was not a queen begging for mercy, but a monarch arriving in divine splendor. From the beginning, Cleopatra had Antony exactly where she wanted him. He was captivated not only by her beauty, but by her wit and confidence. Like Caesar before him, he discovered that Cleopatra was far more than a seductress.
She spoke with intelligence, she laughed with charm, and she matched his excesses with her own grandeur. When he invited her to dine with him, she refused, insisting that he come to her banquet instead. There she outdid him in luxury, feasting him with exotic dishes, endless wine, and dazzling displays of Egypt's wealth. Antony was enthralled. Their affair began quickly, but it was not only passion that bound them together. Cleopatra needed Antony's power to keep Egypt safe from Rome's control, and Antony needed Cleopatra's riches to fund his ambitions in the East. For both of them, it was a union of necessity as much as desire. But unlike her calculated relationship with Caesar, this time Cleopatra seemed to find true companionship. Antony was different from Caesar, less cold, less cautious, more indulgent, more reckless. With him, Cleopatra could be both a queen and a woman. That winter, Antony followed her to Alexandria. The city became their playground. Together they formed what came to be known as the Inimitable Livers, a society of pleasure where they feasted, drank, and played games late into the night. They disguised themselves as commoners and roamed the streets, testing their subjects' loyalty and reveling in mischief. Cleopatra delighted in Antony's humor, while he marveled at her intelligence and command. For a time, they seemed to live outside the world's politics, wrapped in their own extravagant romance. Yet politics could not be ignored. Cleopatra gave birth to twins in 40 BC, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Later, another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, would follow. These children bound Antony to her forever. While he returned to Rome at times, even marrying Octavian's sister Octavia for political reasons, his heart and his loyalties remained in Egypt. Cleopatra's influence over Antony grew so great that many in Rome began to whisper against him. They claimed he had abandoned his Roman heritage, that he had been bewitched by a foreign queen, that he was enslaved by luxury and lust. Octavian, ever ambitious, spread rumors that Antony planned to make Alexandria his new capital and crown Cleopatra as queen of the world. Roman propaganda painted her as a dangerous enchantress, a threat to the Republic itself. But for Antony, Cleopatra offered more than passion. She offered legitimacy in the East. In a famous ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria, Antony declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings and distributed eastern territories to her children. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was proclaimed the rightful heir of Caesar himself. To the Romans, this was an outrage. To Cleopatra, it was a triumph, the culmination of her lifelong ambition to secure her dynasty's future. Yet the cons of this love affair were beginning to outweigh the benefits. By aligning himself so closely with Antony, Antony made himself an enemy of Rome's most powerful man. The rivalry between them grew into open war. Octavian portrayed himself as the defender of Roman tradition, and Antony a traitor under the spell of an Egyptian temptress. The people of Rome, already suspicious of Cleopatra, rallied behind Octavian. The decisive moment came in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet faced Octavian's forces in a naval confrontation off the coast of Greece. Cleopatra herself commanded part of the fleet, but when the battle turned against them, she retreated with her ships. Antony, torn between love and duty, abandoned the fight to follow her. Their forces crumbled, and the war was lost. They returned to Egypt, their empire of dreams reduced to ashes. For a time, they tried to live as they once had, but the shadow of Octavian loomed larger. In 30 BC, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony, defeated and despairing, fell on his sword, dying in Cleopatra's arms. With his death, Cleopatra faced the end. She tried once more to negotiate with Octavian, but when it became clear that he intended to parade her as a captive in Rome, she chose to end her life. According to legend, she arranged for a venomous asp to be smuggled to her chambers, and with its bite, she joined Antony in death. Their affair, like their lives, was both magnificent and tragic. For Cleopatra, it had brought wealth, children, and a partner who matched her in extravagance and ambition. Together, they had ruled as king and queen of the East, daring to challenge Rome itself. But the price was the fall of her dynasty, the end of Ptolemaic Egypt, and her own death. For Antony, it was love that cost him his honor, his power, and his life. Yet even in defeat, their love affair has endured through the centuries as one of history's greatest romances. Cleopatra and Mark Antony were more than lovers. They were partners in a grand vision, a dream of an Eastern empire independent of Rome. That dream perished at Actium, but their story lives on, a tale of passion, power, and downfall, as unforgettable as the queen and general who dared to live it.
Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, met her end in the summer of 30 BCE. After years of political struggle and alliances with powerful Roman leaders, including Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, her fate was sealed when Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, defeated her forces. When Octavian's army entered Alexandria, Cleopatra retreated to her mausoleum. She had just witnessed the downfall of her kingdom and the death of her partner, Mark Antony, who took his own life after believing she was already gone. Grief-stricken and unwilling to be paraded in chains as a trophy in Rome, Cleopatra made her final decision. Ancient writers tell different versions of what happened next. The most famous account says she arranged for a basket of figs to be delivered to her chamber. Hidden inside was an asp, a poisonous Egyptian cobra. Cleopatra, dressed in her royal garments, allowed the snake to bite her, ending her life swiftly. Other historians suggest she may have used a toxic ointment or a sharp hairpin coated in poison. What is certain is that Cleopatra died at the age of 39 inside her palace in Alexandria on August 12, 30 BCE. Soon after, Octavian allowed her to be buried with Mark Antony, uniting them in death as they had been in life. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's transformation into a Roman province. With Cleopatra's passing, one of history's most legendary reigns came to a close, leaving behind a legacy of power, ambition, and tragedy. For centuries, the final resting place of Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, has been one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. Historians, archaeologists, and dreamers alike have searched for her tomb, wondering where she was buried after her dramatic death in 30 BCE. Was she laid to rest beside her lover, Mark Antony, as ancient sources suggest? Or was her body hidden away in a secret location, lost forever to history? The story of the search for Cleopatra's tomb is not just about finding a burial site. It is about chasing a legend, unraveling history, and connecting to the woman who has fascinated the world for over 2,000 years. Cleopatra's reign was filled with ambition, brilliance, and romance, but also betrayal, war, and tragedy. Her death marked the end of Egypt's independence and the beginning of Roman domination. To uncover her tomb would be to close one of the last open chapters of ancient history. For centuries after her death, writers like Plutarch and Dio Cassius hinted that Cleopatra and Antony were buried together in a mausoleum in Alexandria. But Alexandria itself suffered devastating earthquakes, floods, and invasions over the years. Much of the ancient city was swallowed by the sea, and the precise location of Cleopatra's resting place was forgotten. Some believed it might lie beneath the modern streets of Alexandria, while others suggested it might be lost beneath the waters of the Mediterranean. In the 21st century, a new lead emerged. Dr. Kathleen Martinez, a Dominican archaeologist, proposed a daring theory. She believed Cleopatra's tomb was not in central Alexandria at all, but in the temple complex of Taposiris Magna, located about 30 miles southwest of the city. This temple was dedicated to Osiris and Isis, two deities closely associated with death, resurrection, and eternal life. Cleopatra herself claimed to be the living embodiment of Isis. If she wished to secure immortality in the afterlife, Martinez argued, she may have chosen to be buried near a temple that linked her directly with the gods. Excavations at Taposiris Magna began in the early 2000s. At first, the site seemed unremarkable, another ruined temple scattered with stones and broken statues. But as Martinez and her team dug deeper, astonishing discoveries began to emerge. They uncovered coins bearing Cleopatra's image, busts of Ptolemaic rulers, and religious artifacts that hinted at royal presence. Each find seemed to whisper that the queen's tomb might not be far away. In 2022, the search took a dramatic turn. The team uncovered a massive tunnel hidden beneath the temple. This underground passage stretched for over 1,300 meters, carved with engineering precision that left experts astounded. Some described it as an engineering miracle, rivaling other famous ancient tunnels in scale and craftsmanship. The tunnel lay about 13 meters beneath the ground, suggesting it might have been part of an elaborate system, possibly designed to protect a sacred burial or to channel water around a hidden chamber. Inside and around the tunnel, more treasures came to light. Archaeologists found over 1,000 objects, including statues, pottery, bronze figures, and even an inscribed scarab amulet reading, "The justice of Ra has arisen." Coins discovered at the site bore the likeness of Cleopatra herself, alongside Alexander the Great and other rulers of her dynasty. Each artifact deepened the sense that this was no ordinary temple. Then, in late 2024, the team unearthed something extraordinary: a small white marble bust of a woman wearing a crown. Dr. Martinez believed this could represent Cleopatra, possibly made during her lifetime. The bust's delicate features and regal postures sparked excitement worldwide. Though some experts remained skeptical, the discovery reignited hope that the queen's tomb truly was near. The site of Taposiris Magna itself added weight to the theory. This temple was dedicated to Isis, the goddess of motherhood, magic, and eternal life, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Cleopatra had always aligned herself with Isis, often depicted in art and ritual as the goddess's earthly incarnation. If she wished to merge her legacy with that of Isis, burial at this temple would be deeply symbolic. Moreover, ancient texts mention that Cleopatra wished to be buried with Mark Antony, and Octavian, the Roman conqueror, permitted it. If Antony was taken to this site, Cleopatra may well have followed. Still, not all scholars agree. Some insist that Cleopatra's tomb lies elsewhere, perhaps beneath the waters of the Bay of Alexandria, where underwater excavations have revealed the remains of palaces and temples linked to her rule. Others argue that the evidence at Taposiris Magna, while compelling, is not definitive. Archaeology is often slow, requiring patience, precision, and years of careful excavation before conclusions can be drawn. What is undeniable is the historical impact of this discovery. Even if the tomb itself has not yet been uncovered, the finds at Taposiris Magna have shed new light on Egypt during Cleopatra's reign. They show how her image was worshipped, how she was linked to the gods, and how her legacy endured in artifacts left behind. They also demonstrate the engineering genius of the Ptolemaic period, with tunnels and structures that remain astonishing even today. If Cleopatra's tomb is found, it would be one of the most important archaeological discoveries of all time. It would rival the tomb of Tutankhamun in significance, offering a chance to see how the last queen of Egypt chose to present herself in death. It could reveal treasures buried with her, inscriptions that tell her story, or even her remains, which could provide genetic or forensic evidence about her ancestry and health. Such a discovery would not just satisfy curiosity, it would reshape our understanding of Cleopatra, replace centuries of Roman propaganda with physical evidence from Egypt itself. The fascination with Cleopatra's tomb also speaks to something larger. Cleopatra has always been more than just a queen. To some, she represents female power and resilience in a world dominated by men. To others, she is a tragic figure, a woman caught between love and politics, whose death marked the end of an era. To uncover her tomb is to bridge the gap between myth and reality, between history and legend. The work at Taposiris Magna continues, and each season of excavation brings new possibilities. Whether or not Cleopatra lies there, the discoveries already made have given us glimpses into her world.
The busts, the coins, the tunnel, and the temple walls all speak of a queen who saw herself as divine, who bound her identity to Isis, and who sought to ensure that her story would echo through eternity. For now, Cleopatra's tomb remains elusive, but the search itself has become part of her legend. Just as her life was filled with intrigue, her death continues to inspire quests, theories, and dreams. One day, perhaps soon, the sands of Egypt may finally yield the secret they have guarded for over 2 millennia. And when that day comes, Cleopatra will once again step from the shadows of history into the light of discovery, reminding the world why her name has never been forgotten.
Let's begin with the Ptolemies. A royal family so committed to keeping the bloodline pure, they basically replaced a dating pool with a gene puddle. In the year 69 BCE, in the ancient city of Alexandria, a child was born into the ruling family of Egypt. Her name was Cleopatra, and she belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of rulers descended from Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals. For almost 3 centuries, her family had ruled Egypt, blending Greek traditions with the ancient culture of the Nile. Cleopatra's world was one of both magnificence and danger. The Ptolemaic dynasty was wealthy, powerful, and deeply tied to the grandeur of Alexandria, a city famous for its library, its lighthouse, and its role as a center of learning. But the dynasty was also fragile, constantly shaken by rivalries, family feuds, and the rising power of Rome. From her earliest years, Cleopatra was different from most members of her family. While many of her relatives remained steeped only in Greek language and culture, she was known to be highly intelligent and multilingual. Ancient sources suggest she spoke not only Greek but also the languages of neighboring peoples, possibly Egyptian, Hebrew, and Aramaic. This ability gave her a rare connection to her subjects, something her ancestors often lacked. Her childhood was not peaceful. The Ptolemies were infamous for intrigue, and Cleopatra grew up in an environment where brothers and sisters often competed violently for the throne. Her father, Ptolemy XII, nicknamed Alates, ruled Egypt but was unpopular. He relied heavily on Rome for support, leaving Egypt vulnerable to outside influence. When Cleopatra was around 18, her father died, and she ascended to the throne as co-ruler with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. According to custom, she was expected to marry him, though he was only a child. At first, Cleopatra tried to govern in her own right. She appeared alone on official documents and coins, presenting herself as an independent monarch. But soon, the court faction supporting her brother pushed her aside. By 48 BCE, Cleopatra found herself forced into exile. She fled Egypt, but she did not give up. With determination, she began gathering support to reclaim her throne. This struggle for power marked the beginning of her extraordinary journey, a young queen caught between family rivalries, the ambitions of Rome, and her own desire to secure Egypt's future. It was during this turbulent time that she would soon cross paths with one of the most powerful men in history, Julius Caesar, and with that meeting, her life would change forever. Cleopatra was not only a queen, but also a symbol of the blending of 2 great civilizations. To understand her fully, one must step back into the story of her ancestry. Her bloodline was both ancient and foreign, both rooted in Egypt and yet separate from it. This complexity is one of the reasons why Cleopatra has fascinated the world for more than 2,000 years. The dynasty to which she belonged was called the Ptolemaic dynasty. Its origin lay not in Egypt, but in Macedonia, the land of Alexander the Great. When Alexander died in 323 BCE, his empire stretched from Greece all the way to India. His generals carved this vast domain into smaller kingdoms, each taking a portion for themselves. One of those generals was Ptolemy, the son of Lagos. He claimed Egypt as his share. Ptolemy was clever. Rather than presenting himself as a conqueror, he wrapped himself in the traditions of the land he now ruled. He founded a royal line that combined Greek heritage with Egyptian kingship.
He and his descendants styled themselves as pharaohs, adopting titles that connected them to the gods of Egypt, even as they spoke Greek and followed Greek customs in their court. For almost 300 years, the Ptolemaic family ruled Egypt in this way, standing at the crossroads of cultures. Cleopatra was born into this world in 69 BCE as the daughter of Ptolemy XII. Her father was unmistakably Greek in descent, tracing his line back to Ptolemy I himself. The identity of Cleopatra's mother, however, remains uncertain. Some believe she may have been Cleopatra V, a Greek princess and one of Ptolemy's wives. Others suggest that Cleopatra's mother might have been an Egyptian noblewoman, perhaps from a powerful priestly family. Because the sources are unclear, Cleopatra's exact ethnic background is a mystery. It is this uncertainty that has fueled centuries of debate. Was Cleopatra entirely Greek? Was she partly Egyptian? Could she have been of mixed ancestry, reflecting the mingling of cultures that defined her kingdom? Ancient writers do not give us a clear answer, and so modern historians and enthusiasts continue to speculate. What we do know is how Cleopatra chose to present herself. Unlike many of her ancestors, she embraced the Egyptian language and culture. She was the first of her dynasty to actively learn Egyptian, and she used it to communicate with her subjects. This decision alone set her apart. While earlier Ptolemies were seen as foreign rulers, Cleopatra could speak directly to her people in their own tongue. She also identified herself with the goddess Isis, appearing on coins and monuments in the role of the divine mother and protector of Egypt. This ability to bridge cultures became one of her greatest strengths. To the Greeks and Romans, she could present herself as a queen of Hellenistic sophistication, educated in philosophy, literature, and science. To the Egyptians, she was a pharaoh, in the ancient sense, a daughter of the Nile who honored their gods and traditions. Few rulers in history have managed such a delicate balancing act with such success. The question of her appearance also remains an endless source of fascination. Modern portrayals, from Shakespeare to Hollywood, often depict Cleopatra as a woman of stunning beauty. But the ancient evidence tells a more complex story. Coins minted during her reign show her with a strong, prominent nose and a commanding expression. These were not designed to flatter, they were political images, meant to convey authority and power. Roman writers, who were often hostile toward her, described her not so much in terms of physical beauty, but in terms of her charisma. Plutarch, a Greek historian writing in the Roman world, noted that her attractiveness was not in her looks alone, but in her presence. Her voice, her wit, her intelligence, and her charm, these, he wrote, were the qualities that made her irresistible. To those who met her, she was more than a queen, she was a force of nature. Her education also reflected her ancestry and the world she inherited. In Alexandria, a city filled with scholars, philosophers, and scientists, Cleopatra had access to the greatest learning of her age. She was trained in Greek philosophy and literature, studied mathematics and astronomy, and learned the intricacies of medicine and statecraft. Some sources even suggest she wrote works on these subjects, though none have survived. Her knowledge was not merely academic, it was practical, and she used it to strengthen her rule. She understood the economy of Egypt, which depended heavily on the fertile lands of the Nile and the export of grain. She grasped the delicate balance of politics in the Mediterranean, where Rome's ambitions threatened the independence of every smaller state. She knew the value of diplomacy, the importance of speech, and the power of image. All of this came from her education, her ancestry, and her unique position at the crossroads of cultures. The legacy of her ancestry also carried challenges. As a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, she was bound by traditions of family politics that were often brutal. The Ptolemies had a long history of sibling rivalries, intermarriage, and betrayal. Brothers and sisters were sometimes forced to marry one another to keep the bloodline, quote, pure, though this often led to conflict. Cleopatra herself became co-ruler with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and was expected to marry him according to custom. This union was not a marriage of love, but one of necessity, reflecting the strange and often dangerous traditions of her dynasty. Her ancestry also meant that she was constantly compared to her predecessors. Some had been strong rulers, expanding Egypt's influence. Others had been weak, leaving the kingdom vulnerable to Roman interference. Cleopatra understood that she had to prove herself, not only as a queen, but as a Ptolemy worthy of her lineage. The debates of her heritage and appearance continue to this day, but perhaps they matter less than what she accomplished with the identity she inherited. She was a queen who could move between worlds, who could be Greek and Egyptian, intellectual and divine, political and personal. She turned what might have been a weakness, her family's foreignness, into a strength, making herself a ruler who embodied the richness of both cultures. As she stepped more firmly into her reign, Cleopatra would use this ancestry, this dual identity, to build alliances that shaped the destiny of empires. She was not simply the last of the Ptolemies, she was the bridge between worlds, the heir of Alexander's general and the living pharaoh of Egypt, the woman who could captivate both her subjects and the most powerful men of Rome. Her ancestry was the foundation of her reign. It gave her legitimacy, mystery, and power. And in time, it would become part of the legend that still surrounds her. Cleopatra, the queen who seemed to belong to every world, and yet to none completely.
When most people today hear the name Cleopatra, they imagine a queen of dazzling beauty, adorned in golden jewelry, dressed in flowing silks, and painted with the striking cosmetics of ancient Egypt. In popular imagination, she is remembered as one of the most beautiful women to have ever lived. But how close is this image to the historical reality? What did Cleopatra truly look like, and how was she portrayed both in her own time and in centuries that followed? To answer these questions, we must begin not with legend, but with the evidence left behind from her own reign, her coins, busts, and statues. These are the closest images we have of Cleopatra created during her lifetime. On silver coins minted in Alexandria and other parts of her kingdom, Cleopatra is depicted with sharp, defined features. She is shown with a long nose, prominent chin, and high forehead. Her hairstyle, pulled back tightly and often adorned with a royal diadem, reflects the fashion of her dynasty rather than Egyptian tradition. These images were not meant to flatter, they were political tools. A coin in the ancient world was more than money. It was a message, a miniature portrait of power that traveled in the hands of merchants and soldiers across the Mediterranean. By stamping her image on currency, Cleopatra made her authority visible to all. Some busts and statues believed to represent her offer further insight. In these, she appears with a strong jawline, almond-shaped eyes, and a gaze that seems steady and commanding. One statue shows her with the traditional headdress of an Egyptian pharaoh, connecting her to the long line of rulers stretching back thousands of years. Another presents her in Greek style, dressed as a Hellenistic queen. These dual portrayals reflect her dual identity, Macedonian Greek by ancestry, but Egyptian by the throne she held. Yet even with these physical depictions, the question remains, was Cleopatra truly considered beautiful by the standards of her time? Ancient writers give us mixed answers. Roman authors, often hostile to her, wrote with suspicion, viewing her as a dangerous woman who had ensnared powerful men through charm. But even they could not deny her extraordinary presence. The historian Plutarch, writing a century after Cleopatra's death, described her in a way that has shaped much of her legacy. He admitted that her physical beauty, taken on its own, was not unmatched. She was not the most beautiful woman in the world. But, he explained, her real power lay in her voice, her wit, and her conversation. She had what he called an irresistible charm, a charisma that could not be captured by appearance alone. When she spoke, she could captivate anyone. Her intelligence, her quickness of mind, and the way she carried herself, these qualities, more than anything else, made her unforgettable. Other accounts echo this idea. Cleopatra's allure was not simply a matter of physical attraction, but of personality. She knew how to use her presence as a weapon in politics and diplomacy. She understood the power of image, of making an impression not only through clothing and ceremony, but also through conversation and intellect.
In this way, she embodied the qualities of both a queen and a diplomat. In her own time, Cleopatra carefully shaped her image. She aligned herself with the goddess Isis, the divine mother of Egypt. On temples and inscriptions, she was portrayed as the living embodiment of this goddess, a protector and ruler who stood above ordinary mortals. This association gave her a sacred authority in the eyes of her subjects. She was not only their queen, but their divine guardian. The Romans, however, painted a very different picture. To them, Cleopatra was not a goddess, but a temptress, a woman who had bewitched Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, luring them away from their duties to Rome. Roman propaganda often exaggerated her sensuality and depicted her as a figure of decadence. Octavian, who later became Augustus, spread stories that Cleopatra had corrupted Antony with luxury and passion, turning him against his own people. These stories were powerful weapons in Rome's civil wars, and they left a lasting mark on her image. Over the centuries, as history turned into legend, Cleopatra's appearance was reshaped again and again. In the Middle Ages, she was remembered through classical texts, often as a cautionary tale of female power. In the Renaissance, artists began to depict her as the ultimate femme fatale, a woman whose beauty and seduction brought men to ruin. Paintings of her death, in which she is shown with the asp pressed to her bare skin, became popular subjects, emphasizing her tragic and sensual nature. In the modern era, literature and film carried this image further. Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra portrayed her as a queen of passion and grandeur, full of both charm and unpredictability. Centuries later, Hollywood gave her perhaps her most enduring modern face. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, presented her as a figure of overwhelming beauty, clothed in dazzling costumes and jewels. This portrayal, though visually stunning, owed more to modern imagination than to ancient reality. The truth of Cleopatra's appearance remains elusive. The coins and busts suggest a woman with strong, distinctive features rather than delicate ones. The writings of her contemporaries emphasize her charisma and intelligence more than her beauty. The myths that surround her, however, have made her into a symbol of timeless allure. It may be that her power lay precisely in this combination. Cleopatra did not need to be the most beautiful woman in the ancient world. She needed to be the most captivating, the most commanding, the most unforgettable. And by all accounts, she was. Her image has continued to evolve in every age because she represents more than one woman. She is the embodiment of power and seduction, intelligence and charm, tragedy and triumph. She is a queen who became a legend, a historical figure who has been reimagined countless times, each era projecting onto her its own ideas of beauty and strength. In the end, what mattered most was not how Cleopatra looked, but how she made others feel. Julius Caesar saw in her a valuable ally and perhaps a partner. Mark Antony saw in her a companion in both love and ambition. Her subjects saw in her a pharaoh, the living goddess Isis. And Rome, her enemy, saw in her a threat so powerful that she had to be destroyed, not only in life, but in reputation. Thus, Cleopatra's appearance cannot be separated from her portraits, her propaganda, and her legacy. She was at once real and imagined, a woman of flesh and blood, and a symbol shaped by centuries of storytelling. Whether on ancient coins, Renaissance paintings, or Hollywood screens, her face has never truly disappeared. And perhaps that is her greatest achievement. She ensured that she would never be forgotten, not for her armies or her battles alone, but for her ability to command attention, to live in memory, and to shape the imagination of every generation that followed.
When we think of Cleopatra, it is tempting to focus only on her famous love affairs with Julius Caesar, with Mark Antony, and the stories of passion that have survived for 2,000 years. But if we stop at this, we miss the heart of her story. Cleopatra was not only a woman who captured the attention of powerful men. She was a ruler, a strategist, and above all, a survivor in a world where Egypt's independence hung by a thread. To understand Cleopatra fully, we must see her as a queen whose political skills allowed her to govern one of the richest kingdoms of the ancient world at its most dangerous moment. Cleopatra VII, as she was formerly known, was the last ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Macedonian Greeks who had ruled Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. By the time she came to power in 51 BCE, Egypt was still wealthy but increasingly vulnerable. Rome was expanding across the Mediterranean, swallowing kingdoms one by one. The Ptolemies themselves had grown weaker, plagued by civil wars, debt, and rival claimants to the throne. In this uncertain world, Cleopatra stepped forward as a young queen, barely out of her teenage years. From the beginning, she demonstrated unusual intelligence. Ancient sources tell us that Cleopatra was highly educated. She studied philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Most remarkably, she was said to speak multiple languages fluently, at least 7 or 8, perhaps more. Unlike many of her predecessors, she reportedly spoke Egyptian, a language most of the Greek-born rulers never bothered to learn. This gave her a unique advantage, for she could communicate directly with her people, not only as a monarch but as one of them. Her rule began with struggle. She inherited the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, as was the custom of her dynasty, which often paired siblings as co-rulers. But almost immediately, conflict arose. Advisors of her brother sought to push her aside, leading to her temporary exile. For most rulers, such a setback would have meant the end. But Cleopatra was not one to accept defeat. She carefully planned her return and, in a bold move, aligned herself with Julius Caesar, who had just arrived in Egypt in pursuit of his rival Pompey. The story of her entry into Caesar's quarters, smuggled in, rolled inside a carpet, or perhaps a bed sack, is legendary. More important than the theatrics was her decision. By winning Caesar's support, she regained her throne, secured her position, and showed her ability to turn crisis into opportunity. This was the first sign of her political genius, the ability to recognize who held power and how to win them to her side. Once restored, Cleopatra set about strengthening Egypt. She knew her kingdom's survival depended on stability and prosperity. Egypt's wealth lay in the Nile, its fertile fields, and its trade routes. Under her reign, she managed resources carefully, ensuring that grain production remained high. During times of famine, she took measures to feed her people, actions that increased her popularity among Egyptians. Cleopatra also worked to maintain Egypt's independence in the face of Rome's growing influence. This was no small task. Rome was the superpower of the age, its armies unmatched. But Cleopatra used diplomacy where weapons would have failed. Her relationships with Caesar, and later with Mark Antony, were not only personal but profoundly political. Through these alliances, she positioned Egypt as a key partner rather than a passive subject. Her political acumen extended to propaganda as well. Cleopatra understood the importance of image. She presented herself not only as queen but as pharaoh, tying herself to the long and sacred traditions of Egypt. She was depicted as the goddess Isis reborn, the divine mother and protector of the land. This dual identity, Greek by ancestry, Egyptian by kingship, allowed her to appeal to both her Macedonian elite and her native Egyptian subjects. It was a delicate balance, but she maintained it with skill. At the same time, Cleopatra was pragmatic. She knew when to act boldly and when to yield. For example, she avoided unnecessary wars, understanding that Egypt could not afford prolonged conflict with Rome. Instead, she focused on strengthening the economy, supporting learning, and cultivating alliances. She patronized scholars in Alexandria, one of the great centers of learning in the ancient world, and kept alive the legacy of knowledge that had made Egypt famous since the days of the Great Library. Her political maneuvering became most visible in her relationship with Mark Antony. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra faced uncertainty once more. Rome plunged into chaos, and her survival depended on choosing the right ally. She sailed to meet Antony in Tarsus in 41 BCE, where she staged one of the most spectacular entrances of her reign. According to Plutarch, she arrived on a golden barge with purple sails, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, surrounded by music and incense. This was not mere extravagance, it was strategy.
By appealing to Antony's senses, she secured his attention. By presenting herself as a living goddess, she reinforced her authority. The partnership that followed was both romantic and political. Together, they had children and shared power. Antony provided military support. Cleopatra provided wealth and resources. Their union threatened Octavian, Antony's rival in Rome, who began a propaganda campaign portraying Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign queen who sought to dominate Rome through seduction. This image, though hostile, was proof of her influence. She was seen not as a passive figure, but a political player powerful enough to shake the future of Rome itself. Even as Rome turned against her, Cleopatra continued to demonstrate resilience. After the defeat at Actium in 31 BCE, when Antony's and Cleopatra's forces lost to Octavian, she did not immediately surrender. She returned to Alexandria and made preparations for defense, negotiating with Octavian even as her position crumbled. To the very end, she acted as a ruler, weighing her options, seeking survival, and refusing to be reduced to a mere captive. Cleopatra's political acumen lay in her adaptability. She could act decisively in crisis, charm allies when needed, and rule with authority at home. She balanced tradition with innovation, combining Greek learning with Egyptian identity. She turned personal relationships into political weapons, not out of weakness, but out of necessity in a world where Egypt stood in the shadow of Rome. It is easy to see Cleopatra only through the lens of romance, but when we examine her reign closely, we find a ruler who governed for nearly 2 decades, who navigated wars and civil strife, and who preserved Egypt's independence longer than many thought possible. She was not simply a figure of beauty, but a queen who understood power, how to gain it, how to use it, and how to hold it, even when surrounded by enemies.
When Cleopatra's name is spoken, 2 figures almost always follow: Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These 2 Roman leaders are inseparable from her legend, for it was with them that she secured her throne, preserved Egypt's independence for a time, and etched her story into the memory of the world. The first of these alliances with Julius Caesar was not only one of passion, but also one of profound political consequence. To understand Cleopatra's rise to power, we must step back to the fateful years when her destiny crossed with that of Rome's most famous general. It was 48 BCE, and the Mediterranean was in turmoil. Rome was in the midst of a civil war. Julius Caesar had emerged victorious in Gaul, but his rivalry with Pompey the Great, once his ally, had plunged the Republic into chaos. After a series of battles, Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping for safety. Egypt itself was unstable. King Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra's father, had died 3 years earlier, leaving the throne to his children, Cleopatra VII and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, who were to rule jointly as husband and wife according to Ptolemaic tradition. But in truth, power did not rest equally between them. Courtiers and advisors, acting in the name of the young boy king, sought to push Cleopatra aside. She was forced into exile, stripped of her position, and left to wander in the deserts of Syria, waiting for a chance to return. When Pompey arrived in Egypt, the expected welcome. Instead, he found betrayal. Hoping to please Caesar, who now pursued Pompey across the seas, Ptolemy's regents had Pompey murdered as soon as he landed. His head was severed, his body left on the shore. But when Caesar arrived in Alexandria soon after, he was not impressed. The murder of Pompey, once his ally and the father-in-law of his beloved daughter Julia, filled him with disgust. The Ptolemaic court, hoping to gain favor, had instead insulted the Roman general. It was into this tense atmosphere that Cleopatra made her move. She knew that if she could win Caesar's support, she could regain her throne. According to legend, she arranged to be smuggled into his presence secretly. Some accounts say she was rolled inside a carpet, others say a linen sack. However the details may have been embellished over time, the essence remains clear. Cleopatra took a daring risk. She placed herself directly before the most powerful man in the world, not as a supplicant, but as a partner seeking alliance. Caesar, then 52 years old, was captivated. Cleopatra was only 21. Ancient writers say that it was not merely her beauty that impressed him, but her wit, her charm, and her intelligence. She could converse as an equal, with fluency, humor, and depth of knowledge. For Caesar, embroiled in war and politics, she must have been a rare companion who combined political ambition with personal magnetism. Their relationship quickly deepened, both personally and politically. Caesar intervened in Egypt's dynastic struggle. He declared that Cleopatra and her brother should rule together as intended, but in practice, it was Cleopatra who gained the advantage. A brutal conflict followed, known as the Alexandrian War. Ptolemy XIII and his supporters fought against Cleopatra and Caesar's forces within the very streets of Alexandria. Fires broke out, and parts of the great city were destroyed. Some accounts even suggest the library of Alexandria suffered damage during the fighting. Eventually, Caesar's side prevailed. Ptolemy XIII was killed, drowned in the Nile while fleeing battle. Cleopatra was restored to her throne, now sharing power with another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, though it was she who truly ruled. For Cleopatra, this was a triumph of both courage and calculation. By aligning herself with Caesar, she had transformed her exile into restoration. By risking all, she had won everything. Their relationship did not end with war. Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers. Soon she gave birth to a son, whom she named Ptolemy XV, Philopator, Philometor Caesar, but who was known more simply as Caesarion, Little Caesar. To Cleopatra, this child was more than a son. He was a living bond between Egypt and Rome, a symbol of legitimacy and hope for the future. To her, Caesarion was heir to two worlds. But the union was not without controversy. In Rome, Caesar was still married to Calpurnia, though his wife had grown accustomed to his infidelities. More troubling to many Romans was the idea that Caesar might recognize an Egyptian queen and her son as part of his family. This hinted at kingship, even at monarchy, ideas that were deeply unsettling to Rome's republican traditions. For Cleopatra, however, the connection was invaluable. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra traveled to Rome with Caesarion and stayed in one of Caesar's villas. Her presence caused a sensation. Roman society buzzed with gossip. To some, she was a fascinating exotic queen, a symbol of Egypt's wealth and splendor. To others, she was a dangerous temptress, a foreigner who threatened to corrupt Roman values. Cicero, the famous orator, wrote bitterly about her arrogance. But Cleopatra was undeterred. She walked through Rome as Caesar's guest, her child by her side, a living reminder of her closeness to the most powerful man in the Republic. Her stay in Rome also revealed another side of Cleopatra's political strategy, her ability to project power through image. Monuments and statues were erected in her honor. Some suggest that her likeness even appeared in Caesar's planned temple to Venus, as though she were a goddess. These acts shocked the Roman elite, who saw in them a hint of monarchy, and who feared that Caesar intended to crown himself king. For Cleopatra, however, the connection was invaluable. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra traveled to Rome with Caesarion and stayed in one of Caesar's villas. Her presence caused a sensation. Roman society buzzed with gossip. To some, she was a fascinating exotic queen, a symbol of Egypt's wealth and splendor. To others, she was a dangerous temptress, a foreigner who threatened to corrupt Roman values. Cicero, the famous orator, wrote bitterly about her arrogance. But Cleopatra was undeterred. She walked through Rome as Caesar's guest, her child by her side, a living reminder of her closeness to the most powerful man in the Republic. Her stay in Rome also revealed another side of Cleopatra's political strategy, her ability to project power through image. Monuments and statues were erected in her honor. Some suggest that her likeness even appeared in Caesar's planned temple to Venus, as though she were a goddess. These acts shocked the Roman elite, who saw in them a hint of monarchy, and who feared that Caesar intended to crown himself king. But Caesar's time was short. On the Ides of March in 44 BCE, he was assassinated by a group of senators who believed they were saving the Republic.
Cleopatra, still in Rome, suddenly found herself in danger. Her ally was gone, her future uncertain. With caution, she withdrew from Rome and returned to Egypt, bringing Caesarion with her. Back in Alexandria, she continued to rule, now more firmly than before. She declared Caesarion her co-ruler, elevating him as a symbol of legitimacy. Though Rome never officially recognized Caesarion as Caesar's son, Cleopatra promoted him as such, securing her dynasty's claim. For a time, her position seemed secure. Looking back, the relationship between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar was more than romance. It was a turning point in history. Cleopatra used her intelligence, her courage, and her charm to forge an alliance that restored her throne. Caesar, in turn, found in her not only a lover, but a queen whose ambitions matched his own. Their union shook both Egypt and Rome, leaving behind a son whose very existence became a question of power and legitimacy. In the end, their story was brief, but its impact was profound. Without Caesar, Cleopatra might never have regained her throne. Without Cleopatra, Caesar's image as a man who courted kingship might never have seemed so threatening to the Roman elite. Together, they changed the fate of nations, and their bond set the stage for the next great chapter of Cleopatra's life, the partnership with Mark Antony and the final struggle against Rome.
After the death of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra's world was thrown into uncertainty. Her most powerful ally was gone, assassinated in Rome, and she was forced to withdraw back to Egypt with her young son Caesarion. But Cleopatra was not one to surrender to fate. She had survived exile, war, and palace intrigue, and she understood better than anyone that survival depended on forging alliances with powerful men. Now, as the Roman world descended once again into civil war, a new chapter of her story began, one that would bind her destiny to another Roman general, Mark Antony. It was 41 BCE when Cleopatra first met Antony. Rome was divided. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, his killers, Brutus and Cassius, had fled east, gathering armies. In Rome, Caesar's allies formed the so-called Second Triumvirate: Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, Marcus Lepidus, a seasoned politician, and Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and close friend. Together, they sought to avenge Caesar's death and consolidate control. Mark Antony had long been known as a soldier of immense charisma. He was bold, physically imposing, and famously fond of wine, women, and luxury. Unlike the austere Octavian, who was calculating and cold, Antony was passionate, impulsive, and larger than life. He admired bravery and strength, and he respected those who could meet him as equals. Cleopatra, with her wit, intelligence, and undeniable charm, was exactly the kind of companion who could capture his attention. The meeting between Cleopatra and Antony was legendary. Ancient historians describe it with vivid detail, almost like a scene from a play. Cleopatra did not simply arrive to meet Antony, she staged a spectacle. Sailing up the river Cydnus in Tarsus, she appeared on a magnificent golden barge. The sails were purple, the oars were silver, and the scent of incense filled the air. Cleopatra reclined beneath a canopy, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, with attendants dressed as cupids and nymphs. Musicians played, perfumes spread through the crowd, and the people of Tarsus gathered to watch in awe. Antony was enthralled. This was no ordinary introduction. Cleopatra knew Antony's weaknesses. He admired grandeur and adored theatrics. By presenting herself not as a queen begging for assistance, but as a living goddess, she captivated him instantly. Antony, who prided himself on being a man of action and indulgence, found in Cleopatra a partner who could match his extravagance. Their bond quickly grew both romantic and political. For Cleopatra, Antony was a means to secure her throne and protect Egypt's independence in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. For Antony, Cleopatra was not only beautiful and intelligent, but also a source of immense wealth. Egypt's riches, the grain, gold, and treasures of the Nile, were essential to fund his military campaigns.
Together, they formed a partnership of love, ambition, and necessity. During their early relationship, Antony returned with Cleopatra to Alexandria. There, the two lived in splendor. They formed what some called the inimitable livers, a society dedicated to pleasure, luxury, and excess. They dined on golden plates, feasted on the rarest delicacies, and indulged in games, music, and theater. Ancient accounts tell stories, some true, some perhaps exaggerated, of Cleopatra dissolving a priceless pearl in vinegar and drinking it, simply to prove that she could spend more wealth in a single gulp than anyone else could in a lifetime. But behind the indulgence was strategy. Cleopatra provided Antony with resources for her wars, and in return, Antony restored lands to her kingdom that had long been lost. Under his favor, Egypt reached its greatest territorial extent in centuries. Together, they envisioned a new order in which Egypt and Rome might stand side by side, united through their alliance. Cleopatra bore Antony 3 children, twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and later a son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Just as Caesarion had represented her bond with Caesar, these children symbolized her union with Antony and her hopes for a dynasty that might rival Rome itself. Yet their partnership was not without challenges. Back in Rome, Antony's relationship with Cleopatra caused scandal. The Roman people were already suspicious of foreign queens, and Cleopatra was seen as a dangerous influence, just as she had been during Caesar's time. To calm tensions, Antony married Octavia's sister, Octavia, in 40 BCE. For a time, he attempted to balance his Roman duties with his Egyptian affair, but the bond with Cleopatra proved too strong. Over time, Antony drifted further from Rome and deeper into Cleopatra's world. He embraced Egyptian customs, dressed in local style, and even participated in religious ceremonies with her. This gave Octavian, his rival, an opportunity. Octavian portrayed Antony as a man who had abandoned Roman values, seduced and corrupted by a foreign queen. Roman propaganda painted Cleopatra as a sorceress who had ensnared Antony, threatening the very future of Rome. In 34 BCE, Antony held what became known as the Donations of Alexandria. In a grand ceremony, he distributed lands to Cleopatra and their children. Caesarion was declared the true son of Caesar and king of kings, while the other children received vast territories across the eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra sat beside Antony as though she were his equal, not a queen dependent on Rome, but a sovereign ruler in her own right. For Cleopatra, the donations were a triumph. She had secured recognition for her children and strengthened her dynasty. For Rome, however, it was an outrage. Antony seemed to be handing Rome's conquests to a foreign queen and her offspring. Octavian seized upon this, spreading fear that Antony intended to abandon Rome entirely and establish a new capital in Alexandria with Cleopatra as his queen. The tension escalated into open conflict. By 32 BCE, war was inevitable. Octavian declared war not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra, framing the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign power. This was a clever political move, for it cast Antony as a traitor allied with Rome's enemy. The stage was set for one of the most famous battles in history, the naval clash at Actium in 31 BCE. But before we reach that moment, it is important to reflect on what Cleopatra and Antony had created together. Their relationship was more than romance. It was a partnership built on ambition, power, and vision. Cleopatra gave Antony the wealth and resources he needed, and Antony gave Cleopatra legitimacy, territory, and protection. Together, they dreamed of an empire that would unite East and West, blending Egyptian tradition with Roman might. Yet it was also their downfall. By tying her fate so closely to Antony, Cleopatra tied it to his enemies as well. When Octavian rose against them, she could not separate her future from his. Their love, their children, their vision of a shared empire, all of it would be tested in the fires of war. In the end, Cleopatra and Antony's story was not simply one of passion. They stood against the tide of Roman expansion, daring to imagine a different world. And though history would remember their end as tragic, their love ensured that their names would echo together for eternity.
By the late 30s BCE, Cleopatra and Mark Antony stood at the height of their power. Together, they ruled not only Egypt, but vast territories across the eastern Mediterranean. Their children had been granted royal titles, and their vision of a new dynasty seemed within reach. But power always invites rivals, and in Rome, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, was carefully preparing to destroy them both. The alliance between Antony and Octavian had once been solid. They were bound by their loyalty to Caesar and by Antony's marriage to Octavia, Octavian's sister. Yet time and distance had weakened that bond. Antony's devotion to Cleopatra and his long absence from Rome gave Octavian the chance to turn public opinion against him. In Rome, Octavian was building his image as the defender of traditional Roman values. He presented himself as disciplined, moral, and dutiful, while Antony was portrayed as indulgent, reckless, and corrupted by the charms of a foreign queen. Cleopatra became the symbol of all that Romans feared, an outsider who might steal their empire through seduction and sorcery. Roman propaganda was relentless. Coins were minted showing Octavian as the champion of Rome. Poets and politicians whispered that Antony was no longer a true Roman, but a slave to Cleopatra. They claimed he wore Egyptian clothing, worshipped Egyptian gods, and even called himself a king in her presence. The donations of Alexandria, where Antony declared Cleopatra's children rulers of vast lands, were especially scandalous. To the Romans, it looked as though Antony was preparing to hand over Rome's hard-won conquests to an Egyptian dynasty. Octavian seized the opportunity. In 32 BCE, the Roman Senate, under Octavian's influence, stripped Antony of his titles. But Octavian was clever. He declared war not against Antony directly, but against Cleopatra. By doing so, he framed the conflict as Rome defending itself against a foreign queen, while Antony's decision to fight alongside her made him look like a traitor. The conflict between the two sides built steadily until it reached its climax at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. This was not simply a clash of armies, it was a contest between two visions of the world. On one side stood Octavian, representing the traditional Roman Republic, or at least the image of it he projected. On the other stood Cleopatra and Antony, rulers who dreamed of an Eastern empire blending Roman strength with Egyptian wealth and culture. The battle was fought on the sea near the western coast of Greece. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet was massive, composed of heavy, richly equipped warships. These vessels were grand, but also slow and difficult to maneuver. Octavian's admiral, Marcus Agrippa, commanded lighter, faster ships that could strike quickly and retreat. The difference in naval strategy would prove decisive. For months, Antony and Cleopatra had been cornered. Agrippa cut off their supply lines, isolating them from reinforcements and provisions. Disease and hunger spread among their men, while Octavian's forces grew stronger. Antony knew he had to make a decisive move, and so he prepared for a great naval battle. On the morning of September 2nd, 31 BCE, the fleets clashed. The battle raged fiercely, with ships ramming and grappling, soldiers fighting across decks, and fire spreading across the sea. Antony commanded bravely, but Octavian's forces had the advantage of speed and discipline. Then came the moment that would define the outcome. Cleopatra, commanding her own squadron of ships, suddenly broke from the fighting and sailed away from the battle. Historians have long debated why she did this. Some say it was a prearranged plan with Antony, an escape if things went poorly. Others claim she panicked, fearing capture. Whatever the reason, Antony, upon seeing Cleopatra's retreat, abandoned his command and followed her. The sight of their leaders fleeing shattered the morale of Antony's forces. Confusion spread, discipline collapsed, and Octavian's fleet pressed the attack. By the end of the day, Antony's once mighty navy was in ruins. The battle was lost, and with it, the dream of a new Eastern empire. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, but the shadow of defeat hung heavily over them.
Octavian pursued relentlessly, determined to eliminate them once and for all. In Rome, Octavian declared victory, presenting himself as the savior of the Republic. He celebrated Actium as the moment when Rome had been saved from the clutches of a foreign queen. Cleopatra's name was cursed, Antony's honor was destroyed, and the tide of history was turning inexorably against them. Yet even in defeat, Cleopatra remained defiant. She returned to Alexandria, still a queen, still determined to protect her throne and her children. She fortified the city, gathered resources, and prepared for the final confrontation with Rome. Antony, though broken in spirit, remained by her side. Their love had survived scandal, war, and betrayal, and now it would carry them through to the bitter end. The Battle of Actium was not just the turning point in their story, it was the turning point in the history of the Mediterranean world. With Cleopatra and Antony's defeat, the last real opposition to Octavian's rise was removed. Soon, Octavian would become Augustus, the first empire of Rome, and the Roman Republic would give way to the Roman Empire. For Cleopatra, Actium marked the beginning of her final struggle. She had gambled everything, her throne, her wealth, her legacy, on Antony, and now she faced the consequences. The queen who once dazzled Caesar, who seduced Antony, and who defied the might of Rome would now have to find a way to face the unstoppable force of Octavian's armies. But Cleopatra was never one to go quietly. Her story was not yet finished, and her final act would be as unforgettable as her life.
The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE had sealed Cleopatra's fate. Though she and Antony escaped with their lives, their power was broken, their fleets destroyed, and their dream of an Eastern empire shattered. Back in Alexandria, the queen faced a future where the armies of Rome were closing in and the shadows of defeat hung heavily over her palace. Yet Cleopatra was not a woman to surrender easily. She had spent her entire life fighting for her throne, her people, and her survival. Even in these final days, she remained a strategist, a ruler, and above all, a queen. When Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt, their position was precarious. Octavian had won not only a military victory, but also the war of perception. In Rome, he cast Cleopatra as a dangerous temptress who had bewitched Antony and nearly stolen Rome's destiny. The Senate and the people of Rome saw her as the embodiment of foreign corruption, a queen who had dared to challenge the eternal city. Still, Cleopatra did not despair. She fortified Alexandria, stockpiled treasure, and sought new alliances. She even sent emissaries to distant kingdoms, offering gold in exchange for support. Yet her power was waning, and one by one, potential allies turned away, unwilling to risk Rome's wrath. Antony, meanwhile, was a shadow of his former self. Once Rome's greatest general, he now found himself branded a traitor and abandoned by many of his followers. His loyalty to Cleopatra never wavered, but his spirit was broken. He drank heavily, struggled with despair, and clung desperately to the love that had once given him strength. By 30 BCE, Octavian marched on Egypt. His armies swept through the land, meeting little resistance. The people of Egypt, weary from war, could not stand against the might of Rome. Octavian's generals moved swiftly toward Alexandria, while his fleet cut off the city from escape. Cleopatra prepared for the inevitable siege. In these last days, she considered every possible strategy. Some sources suggest she even entertained the idea of sending her children into hiding, hoping to preserve her dynasty through them. She also tried one last time to negotiate with Octavian. She sent gifts, messages, and pleas, offering to surrender her throne if her children could be spared. Octavian, however, was a master of patience. He played along with her negotiations, but secretly resolved to bring her to Rome as a living trophy of his triumph. For Cleopatra, this was the ultimate humiliation. To be paraded in chains through the streets of Rome, mocked and jeered by the people, was a fate worse than death. As Octavian's forces surrounded Alexandria, Antony made one last attempt to resist.
He led a desperate charge against Octavian's troops, but it was hopeless. His men were outnumbered and outmatched. Soon, word reached him that Cleopatra had been captured, or so he was told. Believing that his beloved queen was already dead, Antony could no longer bear to live. He fell on his own sword, choosing an honorable death over capture. But his wound did not kill him instantly. In agony, he was carried to Cleopatra's hidden chambers, where he died in her arms. According to ancient accounts, she wept bitterly over him, embracing his body and covering him in tears and blood. Their love, forged in passion and tested in war, had reached its tragic end. Now alone, Cleopatra faced the end with dignity. Octavian entered Alexandria and confronted her directly. By all accounts, he treated her with respect, yet his intentions were clear. He wanted her alive to parade in his triumph back in Rome. Cleopatra understood this perfectly. In her final days, she prepared carefully for death. She bathed, dressed in her finest royal robes, and adorned herself with jewels. She visited Antony's tomb, offering prayers and declaring her wish to be buried beside him. She feasted one last time with her attendants, as though to remind the world that she was still a queen even in her final hours. The exact details of her death remain a mystery. Ancient writers tell us that she arranged for a venomous serpent, an asp, to be smuggled into her chamber, hidden in a basket of figs. After eating, she lifted the serpent to her breast and allowed it to strike, its poison bringing a swift death. Other accounts suggest she used a poisoned ointment or a sharp hairpin dipped in venom. The truth is uncertain, but what matters is that Cleopatra chose her own end, denying Octavian the satisfaction of parading her in Rome. When Octavian entered her chamber, he found her lifeless body lying on a golden couch, dressed as if for a royal ceremony. Two of her loyal attendants lay dead beside her, having chosen to follow their queen into death. Cleopatra was 39 years old. Octavian was furious at being denied his living trophy, but he could not help but admire her courage. He allowed Cleopatra to be buried with Antony, granting her final wish. Their tomb has never been definitively found, but somewhere in Egypt, the queen and her Roman lover were laid to rest side by side. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty came to an end. Egypt, once a powerful and independent kingdom, became a province of Rome. The age of the pharaohs, which had lasted for thousands of years, was over. Octavian returned to Rome triumphant. In 27 BCE, he was granted the title Augustus, becoming the first emperor of Rome. The Roman Republic was gone, replaced by the Roman Empire. And at the heart of this transformation was Cleopatra's story: her rise, her loves, her wars, and her death. Cleopatra's life ended in tragedy, but her legacy endured for centuries. To the Romans, she was remembered as a seductress, a dangerous foreign queen who had nearly brought down their republic. Their writers and poets portrayed her as cunning, manipulative, and dangerously alluring. But there was another side to her story. Cleopatra was also remembered as one of the most intelligent and capable rulers of her age. She spoke many languages, governed wisely, and preserved Egypt's independence for as long as possible against the might of Rome. Her charisma, her ambition, and her refusal to surrender made her unforgettable. In later centuries, her legend only grew. Shakespeare immortalized her in his play Antony and Cleopatra, portraying her as both majestic and vulnerable, a queen torn between love and power. Painters of the Renaissance and Baroque eras depicted her dramatic death, often with the asp at her breast. In the 20th century, Hollywood made her a symbol of beauty and glamour, most famously in the 1963 film starring Elizabeth Taylor. Even today, Cleopatra remains one of history's most iconic figures. She is remembered not only for her relationships with Caesar and Antony, but for her determination to shape her own destiny in a world dominated by men. She represents both the grandeur of ancient Egypt and the timeless struggle of a woman fighting for power, survival, and love. Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era, but her story continues to captivate the imagination of the world. More than 2,000 years later, her name still evokes mystery, passion, and power. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, the lover of Rome's greatest men, and the queen who defied an empire. Her life reminds us that history is not only about battles and empires, but also about the choices of individuals, choices that can change the course of the world. Cleopatra chose to live as a queen and to die as one, leaving behind a legacy that no conqueror could erase.
The life of Cleopatra came to its dramatic end in 30 BCE. Yet, as fascinating as her story is, one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world still remains unsolved: the location of her tomb. Cleopatra and Antony, bound together in life and death, were said to have been buried side by side in Egypt. But where exactly they rest has puzzled historians, archaeologists, and dreamers for over 2,000 years. After Cleopatra's death, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, granted her one final dignity. Despite his frustration that she had denied him a triumph, he allowed her to be laid to rest alongside Antony. Ancient writers like Plutarch tell us that she was buried splendidly and royally with Antony. But the details end there. No ancient author recorded the exact location of the tomb. Some claimed it was in Alexandria, the city Cleopatra had ruled and transformed into one of the greatest cultural centers of the ancient world. Others suggested it might have been hidden somewhere more remote, far from the reach of her enemies. What we do know is that the tomb was built quickly, likely in the days immediately following their deaths. Octavian would not have lingered long in Egypt. His goal was to return to Rome with his victory secure. If Cleopatra was buried in Alexandria, then her tomb may have been lost to the sea. Over centuries, earthquakes and tidal waves reshaped the coastline of Egypt. Much of ancient Alexandria, including palaces, temples, and monuments, now lies underwater in the harbor. The royal quarter of the Ptolemies, where Cleopatra lived, is today beneath the waves. Archaeologists have uncovered statues, columns, and even sphinxes from the submerged ruins. It is entirely possible that Cleopatra's tomb lies hidden somewhere under the sea, waiting to be discovered. But there is another possibility, one that has fueled modern excavations. One of the most intriguing theories is that Cleopatra and Antony were buried at Taposiris Magna, a temple complex about 30 miles west of Alexandria. This temple, dedicated to the goddess Isis, would have been a fitting place for Cleopatra, who was often associated with Isis herself. In recent decades, archaeologists have conducted extensive digs at Taposiris Magna. Led by Kathleen Martinez, a Dominican archaeologist, the excavations have uncovered tunnels, tombs, mummies, and artifacts dating to Cleopatra's time. The team even discovered coins and carvings bearing Cleopatra's name and image, suggesting that the queen's presence was strong in the area. Though no definitive tomb has yet been found, the discoveries have raised hopes that Cleopatra's final resting place may lie within the temple or beneath its foundations. The mystery of Cleopatra's tomb is not simply about archaeology. It is about history, identity, and memory. Finding her burial place would shed light on how the last queen of Egypt wanted to be remembered. Was she buried in royal Egyptian style with golden sarcophagi and hieroglyphic inscriptions? Or was her tomb more Roman in design, reflecting her life caught between two worlds? It might also answer questions about her children. Some speculate that Cleopatra's offspring, particularly Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, may have been buried nearby, if they survived long enough. While ancient accounts say Caesarion was killed on Octavian's orders, there is no firm evidence of his final resting place. Most importantly, finding the tomb would give us a tangible connection to Cleopatra herself. For centuries, she has been a figure of myth, legend, and imagination. Her tomb could provide the historical reality that has long eluded us. Even without a known grave, Cleopatra achieved a form of immortality. Her story continues to be told, retold, and reimagined. Perhaps it is fitting that her tomb remains hidden, shrouded in mystery, much like her life. Ancient Egyptians believed that a ruler's spirit lived on through their tomb and their memory.
Cleopatra's memory, preserved in history, literature, and art, has far outlived the stone walls of any burial chamber. Excavations continue at sites like Taposiris Magna. Every discovery brings new excitement. Whether or not her tomb is ever found, the search itself keeps Cleopatra's story alive in the public imagination. For some, the mystery is even more powerful than the answer. The idea that Cleopatra still lies hidden, waiting to be found, allows us to dream of uncovering one of history's greatest secrets. Cleopatra's life ended in tragedy, but her mystery endures. She was a queen who fought for her throne, who loved and lost, and who chose her own death rather than surrender to humiliation. In death, as in life, she defied the world's expectations. Perhaps one day her tomb will be discovered, and we will stand face to face with the last queen of Egypt. Or perhaps she will remain forever hidden, her legacy preserved not in stone, but in the stories we tell. Either way, Cleopatra has achieved what every ruler dreams of: eternal remembrance.
The story of Cleopatra did not end with her death in 30 BCE. In many ways, that moment was only the beginning of a new life for the queen, one that has lasted for over 2,000 years. While her kingdom was absorbed into Rome, Cleopatra herself became larger than life, transformed into a legend, a symbol, and a timeless figure in art, literature, and popular culture. Her legacy has shifted across centuries, shaped by the pens of poets, the brushstrokes of painters, and the lenses of filmmakers. Each era has seen her differently, sometimes a cunning seductress, sometimes a tragic heroine, and sometimes a powerful ruler ahead of her time. Cleopatra's reputation was first shaped not by Egyptians, but by her enemies. After her death, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, controlled the story. To him, Cleopatra was not a queen defending her throne, but a dangerous foreign woman who had bewitched two of Rome's greatest men. Roman writers like Horace and Propertius described her as a temptress, a woman whose charms threatened the stability of the Roman world. In this telling, she was not a ruler of intellect, but a figure of excess and luxury. This propaganda served Octavian well. By portraying Antony as a man who had been enslaved by Cleopatra's beauty, he justified his victory as a defense of Roman virtue. Thus, from the beginning, Cleopatra was cast in a dual role: powerful but dangerous, beautiful but destructive. More than 1,600 years later, Cleopatra reappeared on the stage of Renaissance England. In his play Antony and Cleopatra, 1607, William Shakespeare gave her one of her most enduring portraits. Shakespeare's Cleopatra is witty, playful, and unpredictable. She is deeply in love, yet fiercely independent. Unlike the cold seductress of Roman accounts, she is passionate and human, capable of laughter, jealousy, and tenderness. Her final moments in the play, choosing the asp over humiliation, are written as a triumphant act of self-possession. She dies after the high Roman fashion, but also as an Egyptian queen, refusing to let her legacy be controlled by Rome. Through Shakespeare, Cleopatra became not just a historical figure, but a universal symbol of love, loss, and defiance. During the Renaissance and Baroque periods, artists across Europe were fascinated by Cleopatra's dramatic death. Painters like Guido Reni and Artemisia Gentileschi created works depicting the queen with the asp at her breast, often emphasizing her beauty even in death. These paintings often reflected the values of their time. To some, Cleopatra represented the dangers of passion and female power. To others, she was a romantic heroine, noble in her final act. By the 18th and 19th centuries, romantic poets and painters had embraced her fully. Cleopatra appeared in operas, ballets, and novels, each retelling her story with new layers of imagination. The 20th century brought Cleopatra to the silver screen. Silent films of the early 1900s showed her as a glamorous temptress surrounded by luxury and jewels. But the most famous portrayal came in 1963 with Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra. The film became legendary not only for its costumes and sets, but for its scandalous behind-the-scenes romance between Taylor and Richard Burton, mirroring the love story of Cleopatra and Antony. In this film, Cleopatra was presented as both a queen and a lover, a woman of political skill and personal passion. For many, Taylor's image remains the definitive Cleopatra, a dazzling, powerful woman draped in gold. Hollywood cemented her as a pop culture icon, blending history and fantasy into a spectacle that continues to influence how we picture her today. In more recent years, Cleopatra has been re-examined as more than a seductress or tragic lover. Scholars and filmmakers have highlighted her political brilliance, her command of languages, her economic reforms, and her ability to navigate one of history's most dangerous political landscapes. Modern writers see her as a ruler who defied the male-dominated world of Rome, a queen who refused to be a puppet, and a leader who fought for her dynasty until the end. In this sense, Cleopatra has become a feminist icon, a reminder of how women in power have often been misrepresented by history, their achievements overshadowed by their personal lives. Even today, Cleopatra continues to inspire. She appears in novels, television shows, fashion designs, and video games. Musicians and artists invoke her name to symbolize power, allure, and mystery. The fascination with her tomb has also made headlines, with archaeologists searching for her final resting place in hopes of solving one of history's greatest mysteries. Her image, whether on coins of the ancient world or posters of modern films, remains instantly recognizable. Few historical figures have maintained such a presence across so many centuries. What makes Cleopatra's legacy so powerful is its adaptability. She has been many things to many people. To the Romans, she was a dangerous foreign queen. To Shakespeare, a tragic heroine. To painters, the embodiment of beauty. To Hollywood, a glamorous spectacle. To modern audiences, a brilliant leader and symbol of resilience. In truth, Cleopatra was all of these things and more. She was a queen who lived at the crossroads of civilizations, who understood the power of image as much as politics, and who turned her life into a story that would never be forgotten. Though her tomb remains lost, Cleopatra has achieved a form of immortality greater than any monument could provide. She exists in the collective imagination, alive in every retelling of her story. More than 2,000 years after her death, we still speak her name. We still debate her choices, her loves, her triumphs, and her failures. She remains one of the most recognizable women in world history. In the end, Cleopatra accomplished what all rulers dream of. She made herself unforgettable.
Hey, history lovers! Ever wonder about a city carved directly into towering rose-red cliffs? A city so ancient, so mysterious, that it seems to whisper tales of a forgotten people? Get ready, because today we're unearthing the secrets of Petra, the Rose City, a place where every rock face has a story and every shadow holds a whisper of a lost civilization. From its hidden desert location to the incredible ingenuity of its creators, prepare to be absolutely mesmerized by the Nabateans and their breathtaking masterpiece. Stick around, because you won't believe the engineering and artistry that went into creating wonders like the iconic treasury and the colossal monastery. This is more than just history, it's an adventure waiting to unfold.
Petra, meaning rock in Greek, is an ancient city located in southwestern Jordan, nestled in a great rift valley east of Wadi Araba, about 80 kilometers south of the Dead Sea. It's often called the Rose City due to the reddish hue of the sandstone cliffs from which its incredible structures are carved. The history of Petra stretches back to prehistoric times, with evidence of human settlement in the area as early as 7000 BCE during the Neolithic period. The Edomites occupied the region around 1200 BCE. However, it was the Nabateans, an ancient Arab tribe, who truly established Petra as their capital in the 4th century BCE. Under Nabatean rule, Petra flourished as a major trading hub, strategically positioned along vital caravan routes that transported frankincense, myrrh, spices, and other goods between Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and even as far as China and India. This immense wealth allowed the Nabateans to develop a sophisticated civilization and create the awe-inspiring rock-cut architecture we see today. In 106 CE, the Roman Empire, under Emperor Trajan, annexed the Nabatean kingdom, making Petra part of the Roman province of Arabia Petraea. Despite this, Petra continued to thrive for a period. However, a combination of shifting trade routes and devastating earthquakes, particularly in 363 CE, led to the city's gradual decline and eventual abandonment by the 8th century CE. Petra remained largely unknown to the Western world until its rediscovery by the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt in 1812. Today, Petra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the new 7 wonders of the world, attracting millions of visitors who come to marvel at its unique blend of ancient Eastern traditions and Hellenistic architecture. The Nabateans were an extraordinary ancient Arab people whose story is one of resilience, ingenuity, and immense wealth built on trade in the most challenging of environments. From nomads to masters of trade. Originally, the Nabateans were a nomadic Arab tribe, likely migrating from the Arabian Peninsula. Early accounts, such as those by Diodorus Siculus, documenting events from 312 BCE, describe them as fierce and independent desert dwellers, living in tents, shunning agriculture, and resisting outside control. What set them apart was their unparalleled knowledge of the desert. They mastered water conservation, developing sophisticated systems of hidden cisterns and channels to collect precious rainwater, allowing them to survive and thrive where others couldn't. Their nomadic lifestyle eventually gave way to a settled, highly organized society, especially as they began to dominate the lucrative caravan trade routes. Petra, their chosen capital, was strategically located at the crossroads of these routes, connecting Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and even further afield to India and China. They became the ultimate middlemen, controlling the flow of highly sought-after goods. Frankincense and myrrh. These aromatic resins, essential for religious ceremonies and perfumes throughout the ancient world, were their primary source of wealth. The Nabateans transported them from southern Arabia to Mediterranean ports. Spices, precious stones, and luxury goods. Their trade network extended to encompass a vast array of exotic items, including textiles, silks, metals, and even live animals. Bitumen and copper. They also controlled the trade and mining of these vital resources in their own region. A flourishing civilization. This immense wealth allowed the Nabateans to establish a prosperous and expansive kingdom. At its peak, their influence stretched from Damascus in the north to Hegra, modern Madain Saleh in Saudi Arabia, in the south, and to the Mediterranean coast at Gaza. Their civilization was marked by several remarkable achievements. Architectural marvels. Their most iconic legacy is the breathtaking rock-cut architecture of Petra. They didn't just build, they sculpted entire facades, tombs, and temples directly into the sandstone cliffs. This unique style blended indigenous traditions with Hellenistic influences, showcasing incredible precision and artistic flair. Mastery of water engineering. Beyond their famous monuments, their most crucial innovation was their sophisticated hydraulic system. They engineered dams, cisterns, rock-carved channels, and ceramic pipes to collect, store, and transport water across vast distances, sustaining a population that may have reached 20 to 30,000 in Petra alone, in an incredibly arid region. Aramaic language and writing. The Nabateans adopted Aramaic as their written language, and their distinctive script evolved into what would eventually become the basis for the modern Arabic alphabet. While they left few lengthy historical texts, thousands of inscriptions on rocks, tombs, and coins provide invaluable insights into their culture and daily life. Unlike many ancient kingdoms ruled by absolute monarchs, the Nabatean rulers seem to have governed with a more democratic approach, often using titles like Friend of the People, suggesting a consensus-based leadership rather than outright tyranny. While maintaining a distinct identity, they were open to outside influences, incorporating elements of Greek and Roman art into their own unique style. The Nabatean kingdom, despite its wealth and strategic importance, eventually caught the attention of the Roman Empire. In 106 CE, under Emperor Trajan, the Romans annexed the kingdom, transforming it into the Roman province of Arabia Petraea. Petra continued to flourish for a time under Roman rule, becoming a major Roman city. However, the shifting of global trade routes, particularly the increasing reliance on seaborne trade in the Red Sea, gradually diminished Petra's commercial dominance. Furthermore, powerful earthquakes, notably one in 363 CE, caused significant damage. By the 8th century CE, Petra was largely abandoned, its wonders swallowed by the desert sands. Despite their eventual absorption into the Roman Empire and the subsequent loss of Petra to the Western world for centuries, the Nabateans left an indelible mark on history. Their ingenuity in adapting to harsh environments, their economic prowess, and above all, their stunning architectural achievements continue to captivate and inspire, a testament to a truly fascinating and often unjustly forgotten civilization.
The architecture of Petra is truly unique, a breathtaking fusion of natural rock formations and human ingenuity. What sets it apart is that many of its most iconic structures are not built from the ground up, but are meticulously carved directly into the vibrant sandstone cliffs. This rock-cut or hewn architecture is a testament to the Nabateans' exceptional engineering skills, artistic vision, and intimate understanding of their environment. Here are the key aspects that make Petra's architecture so distinctive. Rock-cut mastery. The Nabateans didn't just carve simple facades, they sculpted monumental structures with intricate details, often several stories high, into the living rock. This required precise planning, an understanding of geology, and immense labor. They hollowed out vast interiors for tombs, temples, and residential spaces, demonstrating an almost sculptural approach to construction. Hellenistic and Roman influences with a Nabatean twist. While the Nabateans were an Arab people, their trade empire brought them into contact with various cultures, particularly the Hellenistic, Greek, and later Roman worlds. Their architecture beautifully incorporates elements like columns, pediments, friezes, and classical motifs. However, these elements are often reinterpreted with a distinctive Nabatean flair, leading to unique proportions, stylized floral patterns like their characteristic crow-step merlons, and an overall sense of grandeur that is undeniably their own. The buildings are not merely placed in the landscape, they are part of it. The natural contours, colors, and even imperfections of the sandstone were often incorporated into the design, making the structures feel organically grown from the cliffs rather than imposed upon them. The ever-changing light plays dramatically on the rose-red rock, giving the monuments a dynamic and ethereal quality throughout the day. Though not strictly architectural facades, the sophisticated water collection and distribution systems, channels, cisterns, dams, ceramic pipes, are an integral part of Petra's overall built environment. These engineering marvels allowed the city to thrive in an arid region and are as impressive in their own way as the carved facades.
The treasury, Al-Khazneh. Perhaps the most famous and recognizable monument in Petra, the treasury greets visitors at the end of the dramatic, narrow gorge known as the Sick. Its sudden appearance as you emerge from the darkness is an unforgettable experience. Architecture. Carved out of a single piece of sandstone, the treasury is a stunning example of Hellenistic architecture adapted by the Nabateans. Its facade is approximately 40 meters, 130 feet, high and 25 meters, 82 feet wide. Two tiers of elegant Corinthian columns adorn the facade, creating a sense of classical grandeur. The facade is richly decorated with friezes and figures, though much of the detail has eroded over time. These include mythological figures like Amazons and Victories, as well as eagles, representing the Nabatean god Dushara. The upper section features a broken pediment, a common Hellenistic architectural device, with a central tholos, a circular structure with a conical roof that is particularly distinctive. At the very top, a giant funerary urn, riddled with bullet holes from Bedouins who believed it contained gold, gives the structure its popular name, the treasury. While its exact purpose is debated, it is widely believed to have been a tomb for a prominent Nabatean king, possibly Aretas IV, given its prominent location and elaborate decoration. In stark contrast to the elaborate exterior, the interior is surprisingly plain, consisting of a simple, large chamber with smaller side chambers, reflecting its likely funerary or ceremonial function rather than a residential one. The monastery, Adir. Perched high in the mountains above Petra, the monastery requires a challenging uphill hike of about an hour from the main city area. Its remote location adds to its mystique. Even larger than the treasury, the monastery measures approximately 47 meters, 154 feet, wide and 48 meters, 157 feet high. Like the treasury, it is entirely carved from the rock. Key features: simpler but grand scale. While its decoration is less ornate than the treasury, its sheer size and imposing presence are overwhelming. It shares stylistic similarities with the treasury, including a broken pediment and a central tholos topped with an urn. It features 4 massive unadorned columns that give it a powerful and austere appearance. Large interior hall. Unlike the relatively small interior of the treasury, the monastery boasts a vast open interior hall with an altar at the back. This, along with crosses carved into its walls, suggests it was repurposed as a Byzantine chapel during the Christian era, hence its name. Its elevated position offers breathtaking panoramic views of the surrounding desert, making the strenuous climb well worth the effort. It was likely a significant religious site for the Nabateans before its Christian conversion. Together, the treasury and the monastery, along with the numerous other tombs, houses, and ceremonial structures, showcase the Nabateans' unparalleled ability to transform the natural environment into a monumental, enduring testament to their sophisticated civilization. Imagine stepping off the sun-baked earth, leaving behind the open, desolate landscape of the Jordanian desert. You're immediately drawn into the mouth of the Sick, and the world around you transforms. At first, it's a wide, almost welcoming pathway, but soon, the sandstone cliffs begin to press in. They rise on either side, not just tall, but seemingly impossibly so, dwarfing you to a mere speck. The rock faces, smooth and worn by millennia of wind and water, shimmer with an almost liquid quality, their colors shifting through an incredible palette of deep ochres, fiery reds, and soft, dusty pinks. You might reach out and run a hand over the cool, rough surface, feeling the ancient layers. The sky above narrows to a ribbon of brilliant blue, sometimes barely a sliver, like a jagged crack in the ceiling of the world. The sunlight filters down in dramatic shafts, illuminating patches of rock face, making them glow, while other sections remain in cool, deep shadow, creating a dynamic play of light and dark. The air grows noticeably cooler, and a quiet hush descends, muffling the sounds of the outside world. As you walk deeper, the Sick twists and turns, each bend revealing a new, captivating vista. The path underfoot is uneven, a mix of packed earth and worn stone, echoing with the soft scrape of your shoes and the occasional murmur of other visitors, their voices hushed by the overwhelming scale of the surroundings. You'll notice subtle details carved into the rock by the Nabateans, small niches, water channels meticulously engineered to bring life-giving water into the city, and faint remnants of ancient carvings. The feeling of anticipation builds with every step. You know something incredible lies ahead, but the Sick holds it back, teasing you with its twists and turns. The walls can feel incredibly close, almost oppressive in places, then suddenly open up to a slightly wider space before constricting again. The silence, broken only by the gentle echoes, feels profound, as if the very stones are holding their breath. And then, just as you're immersed in the labyrinthine embrace of the gorge, a tantalizing glimpse appears through a final narrow crack. A hint of ornate columns, a flash of intricate carving, a sliver of impossible beauty. You quicken your pace, your heart thrumming with excitement, as the walls finally draw back and the magnificent, awe-inspiring facade of the treasury explodes into the desert light. A moment so dramatic, so breathtaking, that it truly feels like stepping into another world, into the heart of ancient Petra. You've entered a world transformed. The sun-drenched open desert is gone, replaced by a realm of colossal stone. Above you, on either side, the sandstone cliffs rise not just high, but impossibly so, creating a sense of awe and wonder that washes over you, silencing all but your own breath. They stretch skyward, layers of time etched into their formidable faces, painted in a palette of deep russet, fiery orange, and soft blushing pink. It feels as if you're walking through the very arteries of the earth, a magnificent natural cathedral whose vaulted ceilings are the narrow strips of brilliant blue sky far, far above. Every twist and turn of the path brings a new revelation. The sheer scale of these natural walls is humbling, making you feel like a tiny, insignificant speck in a world of giants. Yet there's also an undeniable feeling of profound beauty, a serenity that comes from being so utterly surrounded by such ancient, majestic power. The air, cooler here in the embrace of the rock, carries a faint, earthy scent, and the light, filtered and diffused, casts dramatic shadows that dance and shift, making the very stone seem alive. This isn't just a place, it's an experience that awakens something primal within you, inviting you to marvel at the raw artistry of nature and the incredible ingenuity of those who dared to carve their legacy into its heart. As you walk, the grandeur of the cliffs isn't the only thing that envelops you. A profound stillness settles, punctuated by the soft scrape of your shoes on the ancient path. But if you listen closely, truly listen beyond the immediate sounds, you can hear the echoes of the past, whispering stories of ancient times. It's not a literal sound, perhaps, but a deep, resonant feeling. The immense, smooth rock walls seem to amplify the quiet, allowing your imagination to fill the space. You might almost catch the faint jingle of camel bells from a long-departed caravan laden with frankincense and spices, pushing deeper into the canyon. Perhaps the murmur of ancient Nabatean voices bargaining in the bustling city center, or the rhythmic tap of a stonemason's hammer carving an intricate facade high above. The distant splash of water from a hidden spring, channeled by ingenious ancient hands, might seem to drift on the air. This isn't just a walk, it's a sensory journey back through millennia. The very air feels steeped in history, carrying the silent weight of countless footsteps, countless lives lived, countless stories unfolding within these very walls. It's as if the spirit of the lost city itself is breathing around you, inviting you to connect with a time when this canyon was a vibrant artery of trade and culture, teeming with life. Imagine the treasury as the sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange and soft violet. The harsh midday glare softens, and a magical transformation begins to unfold before your eyes. As the sun dips lower, the already vibrant rose-red sandstone of the treasury is slowly bathed in a breathtaking golden light. The warm rays strike its intricate facade at an angle, making every carved detail, every column, every frieze stand out in sharp relief. The natural striations and textures of the rock seem to ignite, deepening the reds, enhancing the ochres, and adding a rich, almost molten quality to the stone. Shadows lengthen and deepen within the recessed doorways and beneath the ornate pediment, creating a dramatic contrast that accentuates the monument's three-dimensional grandeur. The air around it feels softer, more serene, imbued with a quiet reverence. The iconic urn at its very peak seems to catch the last pure rays, gleaming like a beacon. In this golden hour, the treasury doesn't just stand, it seems to glow from within, radiating an ancient warmth. It's a moment of profound beauty and tranquility, where the genius of the Nabateans, carved into the very earth, feels most alive, whispering tales of glory under the benevolent gaze of the setting sun. It's a view that etches itself into your memory, a truly unforgettable highlight of Petra's timeless majesty. Beyond the breathtaking visuals, close your eyes for a moment and let your other senses take over. Let the calming sounds of the desert wind and the faint, persistent trickle of water create a serene atmosphere that wraps around you. The wind, no longer a harsh force, sighs softly as it sweeps through the narrow canyons, a gentle, whispering breath across the ancient stones. It carries the subtle scent of dry earth and distant scrub, a timeless melody that has played across these cliffs for millennia. It rustles gently around the colossal treasury, a barely audible hum that seems to carry the secrets of ages. And beneath that soft sigh, if you listen carefully, you'll discern the delicate, persistent sound of trickling water. It's the lifeblood of this arid land, channeled by the ingenious Nabateans through their intricate systems of pipes and conduits carved into the rock. It might be the distant drip from a hidden spring, or the soft gurgle of water moving through ancient channels, a constant, reassuring whisper that speaks of sustenance and survival in this formidable landscape. These subtle sounds combine to create a profound sense of peace. The grandeur of the rock, the golden light, and now the gentle symphony of wind and water merge, transforming your experience into a truly meditative journey. You're not just observing Petra, you're feeling its ancient heartbeat, a quiet, serene rhythm that transcends time. As darkness descends, a new, ethereal chapter begins to unfold over Petra. The last vestiges of twilight fade from the western horizon, and the vibrant hues of the sandstone yield to deeper, more mysterious tones, dark reds turning to charcoal, ochres to shadowed browns. The air grows crisp and cool, carrying the untouched scent of the desert night. And then, above the towering, silent facades, as if a velvet curtain has been drawn back, the stars begin to shine brightly in the incredibly clear desert sky. Without the interference of city lights, the celestial canopy is a breathtaking spectacle. Thousands upon thousands of pinpricks of light emerge, a dazzling tapestry of constellations, nebulas, and the faint milky band of the Milky Way stretching across the vast expanse. Each star feels closer, more intense, a diamond dust scattered across an infinite canvas. Under this magnificent celestial dome, the ancient monuments take on a new, ghostly grandeur. The treasury and other carved structures, no longer illuminated by the sun, stand as colossal silhouettes against the star-dusted sky. Their intricate details are softened, becoming mysterious outlines that hint at their daytime splendor. The silence deepens, broken only by the whispers of the wind, amplifying the feeling of profound history and the timeless connection between this ancient city and the universe above it. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated awe, where you feel truly connected to the echoes of the past and the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. As the last glimmer of the stars becomes a silent, brilliant backdrop, a new light begins to softly emerge, not from the sun, but from above. Imagine the ancient city lit by the ethereal glow of the moonlight, transforming Petra into a truly magical and mystical scene. The sandstone cliffs, which were fiery red by day and silhouetted by starlight, now take on a haunting, silvery luminescence. The moonlight, soft and diffused, washes over the monumental facades of the treasury and other hidden tombs, giving them an almost ghostly glow. Details that were sharp in the sun now soften, creating deep, velvety shadows that play across the intricate carvings, making them appear to shift and breathe with an ancient life. The sick, Previously a shadowed passage becomes a tunnel of whispered secrets under the moon's cool embrace. Every curve and crevice seems to hold a deeper mystery. The air is still and profound, broken only by the occasional gentle sigh of the desert wind. In this silvery light, the scale of Petra feels even more immense, more awe-inspiring. The absence of color and the dominance of light and shadow turn the entire city into a living sculpture, a monochrome dreamscape where the past feels incredibly close, almost tangible. It's a moment suspended in time, where the legends of the Nabateans feel not just like history, but like an active, mystical presence, alive under the watchful eye of the moon. As the magical moonlight bathes the ancient city in its soft glow, and the celestial tapestry of stars continues its silent dance above, the deep sense of peace that has settled upon Petra now extends to you. The echoes of history, the grandeur of the carved cliffs, the ethereal beauty of the night, all slowly begin to recede, leaving behind a profound tranquility. Let the whispers of the wind, now a gentle lullabying sigh through the canyons, and the soft, almost imperceptible sounds of the desert carry you away into a peaceful sleep. The coolness of the night air embraces you, a comforting blanket. The subtle rustle of distant sand, the faint rhythmic chirping of an unseen desert creature, or the barely audible trickle of ancient water channels, these become the soothing soundtrack to your slumber. Every sense softens, every thought drifts away. The vastness of the desert night, the timeless silence of the hidden city, all conspire to invite a deep and restorative rest. You are a part of this ancient landscape, cradled by its serene majesty, drifting into dreams filled with the rose-red glow of dawn, the ingenuity of ancient peoples, and the profound beauty of a world steeped in history. Good night.
So, you've journeyed with us in your imagination through the awe-inspiring sick, witnessed the golden glow of the treasury, felt the serene whisper of the desert wind, and gazed upon Petra under a blanket of starlight and moonlight. But let me tell you, while words and videos can paint a picture, nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to experiencing the magic of Petra for yourself. To stand dwarfed by those colossal cliffs, to trace the ancient carvings with your own eyes, to feel the cool stone beneath your fingertips, and to truly let the profound silence and history wash over you. This isn't just a sight to see, it's a world to step into. If you've ever dreamed of walking through history, of discovering ancient wonders, or simply finding a place of unparalleled beauty and tranquility, then make it your mission to visit Petra someday. It's an adventure that will stay with you long after you've left its rose-red embrace. Start planning your journey. The lost city is waiting to reveal its secrets to you, in person. As you close your eyes now, after this journey through the heart of Petra, take a moment, breathe deeply, slowly, letting the incredible calmness of this ancient city wash over you. Imagine the cool, clean desert air filling your lungs, carrying the faint, soothing scent of stone and open spaces. Feel the echoes of the quiet sick, the gentle embrace of the moonlit cliffs, the soft, timeless whispers of the wind. Let any lingering thoughts or worries dissolve with each slow exhale. This profound peace, the serenity of Petra, is yours to carry. Allow that tranquility to settle deep within you, guiding you gently, effortlessly, as you drift off into a truly peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams infused with the timeless magic of the Rose City.